The sun was sinking low over Maple Avenue, staining the quiet suburban street with gold. From afar, everything looked perfect, the kind of postcard piece that made strangers believe life here was simple, gentle, untouched by pain. The trimmed lawns stood in neat rows, fences painted white and smiles rehearsed for neighbors passing by. But behind one cracked sidewalk and a chipped white porch, that illusion shattered. The silence broke with the sound of a sob, soft, trembling, almost too small for the world to notice, but enough to make heaven itself pause. A little boy stood there, clutching a worn-out teddy bear to his chest, his cheeks streaked with tears, his voice barely a whisper as he looked up through swollen eyes. "He hit my grandma," he said. Just 5 words, but enough to tear the peace from the air, enough to make the golden sunlight turn cold. If you believe that no child should ever cry out of fear, if you believe that kindness, courage, and compassion can still change the world, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who still believes in goodness, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes, where every story reminds us that even the smallest act of love can rewrite someone's life. The boy's name was Ethan, just 6 years old, with dust clinging to his hoodie and scratches on his knees from where he had stumbled down the porch steps. He was small, fragile, the kind of child who still believed teddy bears could protect him. Behind him sat his grandmother, Clara, a woman whose silver hair had once been her pride, now tangled and matted. Her light blue dress was torn at the shoulder, and a dark bruise spread across one side of her face like a cruel stain. She held her arm tight, trying to hide her pain, not wanting Ethan to see. But she couldn't hide what had already been broken, the trust, the safety, the home that was supposed to protect them. At the door stood a man named Ray, his body swaying slightly, a half-empty beer bottle clutched in his hand. His eyes were red with drink and anger, his face hard, twisted with arrogance and something darker, the kind of cruelty that hides behind excuses. He wasn't family. He wasn't love. He was a drifter who had promised to help out after Clara's husband passed away, to fix the roof, mow the lawn, keep her company. But what he brought wasn't help. It was control. It was shouting. It was pain. That afternoon, something had finally gone too far. Ethan didn't understand what started it, he just saw Ray's hand strike his grandmother's face and heard her cry out. The sound froze him. Then came the shatter of glass, the smell of beer, the trembling silence that followed. He didn't think. He just ran. Barefoot, clutching his teddy bear, he stumbled down the path, tears blurring his vision. The world seemed huge and cruel, but he knew one thing: someone had to help. And that's when the rumble came. It began as a distant growl, a thunder that rolled down the street and made every window tremble. Then came the roar, powerful, unyielding, 6 motorcycles turning the corner, their chrome glinting under the dying sunlight. The sound filled the air like a storm of defiance. Every engine pulse was a heartbeat of something raw and unstoppable. The lead rider cut the engine first. He was a tall, broad man with a salt and pepper beard and tattoos that told stories of battles long fought and lessons learned. His leather vest bore the words Hell's Angels, and beneath that, a smaller patch stitched in red, R.L. Ch. Ills. His name was Reed, a man who carried his scars like medals, who'd seen enough of the world to know what real pain looked like. And when he saw a small boy crying on the steps, holding a teddy bear and shaking like a leaf, something inside him shifted, something that had never truly healed. He swung off his bike, boots crunching on the pavement, and crouched in front of Ethan. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, his voice a mixture of gravel and warmth. "What happened?" The boy didn't answer. He just lifted his trembling hand and pointed back toward the porch, toward the old woman trying to sit upright, and the man looming above her. Reed's jaw tightened. A flash of memory cut through his chest, the shouting, the sound of breaking bottles, his mother's tears. He'd been that child once. And the moment he saw Ethan's face, something in him made a silent promise: never again. He rose slowly, his eyes locked on Ray. Behind him, his brothers, 5 men in matching black vests, stood in quiet formation. They didn't need words. Their presence spoke louder than any threat. The neighborhood had gone still. Curtains fluttered, doors cracked open, whispers stirred like wind through the leaves. Ray shifted uneasily, clutching his bottle tighter. "This ain't your business," he slurred, his voice thick with misplaced confidence. But Reed didn't flinch. He stepped forward, the sun glinting off his vest, his shadow falling long across the steps. It became my business, he said, voice low, controlled, and heavy with meaning, the moment I heard a child say those words. The world seemed to hold its breath. Ray's arrogance faltered. The weight of those men, their silence, their presence, it stripped him bare. He glanced at Clara, her face bruised but defiant. Then his gaze flicked to the boy who stood behind Reed now, clutching his teddy bear like a shield. For a moment, shame flickered across his face, weak and fleeting. Reed didn't need to shout. He didn't need to touch him. His calm was enough to unmake the fear that had ruled that porch for too long. She doesn't need your help anymore, he said simply, the words landing like final judgment. Pack your things. You're done here. Ray hesitated, looking for defiance, for fight, but found none. Just quiet strength, unwavering. With trembling hands, he lowered the bottle, turned, and stumbled inside. Moments later, the sound of an engine sputtered to life. His truck roared away down the street, the echoes fading until all that was left was the hush of wind and the slow, steady beat of hope returning. For the first time that day, there was peace. Reed turned back to Clara. She tried to speak, to thank him, but he raised a hand gently. "Ma'am," he said, kneeling beside her, his voice softer now, "no one should ever have to live scared. Not you. Not him." His throat tightened as he glanced at Ethan. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes, eyes that had seen too much for 6 short years, and something inside Reed broke in a way that only compassion can break a man. His crew moved quietly, efficiently. One handed Reed a bottle of water. Another pulled out a first aid kit, cleaning the cuts on Clara's arm. A third made a call to the police and ambulance. The neighbors, once too afraid or too indifferent to act, watched in awe. The men society called dangerous were showing the kind of tenderness the world desperately needed more of. When the ambulance arrived, Reed stayed behind while the paramedics checked Clara's injuries. He sat on the porch steps with Ethan, talking softly about the teddy bear, about how brave he'd been, about how sometimes the strongest people are the smallest ones who speak the truth when it's hardest. And for the first time, Ethan smiled, just a small, fragile smile, but it was real. When it was time for Clara to leave for the hospital, Ethan ran to Reed, wrapping his tiny arms around the biker's thick, tattooed arm. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling but filled with trust. Reed swallowed hard and nodded. No words could match what that meant. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens faded into the distance, the bikers stood silently for a moment, the golden light of sunset spilling over their shoulders. Reed looked one last time at the house, the cracked porch, the small teddy bear left sitting on the step, the boy waving from the window beside his grandmother. Then he turned to his men. "Let's ride," he said simply. Engines roared to life again, deep and powerful, echoing down Maple Avenue, not as a sound of fear, but as a promise. A promise that kindness still rides where it's needed, that protection doesn't always wear a badge, and that sometimes the roughest hands carry the gentlest hearts. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that strength and compassion can come from the unlikeliest people, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Vibes. Help us spread the message that love and courage are still alive in this world.